understand it, we're just having a few technical difficulties, and we'll give our staff one more minute before we begin the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for quieting down. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Planning and Community Development Committee of February 28th for the District of Sechelt. We got a very full agenda today, and of course that reflects in the crowd that we see here gathered. Thank you all for coming. Apologize for there not being seats for everyone. If you see somebody who looks like they need a seat, would you please give it up in a courteous manner? Thank you. Before we begin this meeting, we're going to have a call to order and a declaration of conflict for any councillors who feel they have something they need to declare. Looking left and right, seeing none, we will now move to the adoption of the agenda. I have a mover, Councillor Lutz and Shanks. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to section number 3, appointments and delegations. Our first delegation, 3.1, Mr. Bob Sangster on behalf of the West Sechelt Community Association regarding Ocean View Villas. If you'd please come up to the mic. And the way it works is you just press the red button and then it's blinking. When I allow you to speak, it will be solid. And just a note on the delegations. Our delegation time minute is 10 minutes, so it's upon the delegations to control the length of their presentation. If it goes over 10 minutes, I'll be asking you to conclude. So thank you very much. If you're ready. Button here. There we go. Yeah, you're live.
Testing, 1, 2. Okay, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Bob Sangster, and I'll be presenting this delegation, I guess. And I have a colleague here, Jamie Petker, who will be presenting along with me. Okay. So moving on to page 2. Official community plan, site coverage. This development proposal is not in line with the District of Sechelt's official community plan bylaw number 492, 2010, OCP, Conservation Design with Nature, page 19. Specifically, this development proposal cannot comply with retain significant open space areas, reduces paved surfaces and stormwater discharge in a manner that protects open space, typically 50% of the land area, reduces infrastructure costs, reduces paved services and stormwater discharges, and provides for more diverse housing types. And as you can see with the 2 diagrams on that page, in the lower right-hand labeled Seaview Villas, you can see there's significantly more green space than there is in the Ocean View Villas above it. Now, staying on page 2, in the lower diagram labeled Seaview Villas, there were only 2 roadways coming in off McCourt Road. These roads were all that was needed to service the proposed 11 duplexes. In the upper diagram labeled Ocean View Villas, the current proposal, because the 2 stratas have separated and because of the density, significantly more roadway and parking spaces are required, and Ocean View Villas are proposing to locate much of it on the setbacks. The original approved plan for Seaview Villas permitted 11 duplexes for a total of 22 units. The 4 already constructed duplex account for 8 units. What remained on the previously approved plan was for a further 7 buildings, an additional 14 units. The site coverage for this approved plan was 52%. The buildings covered 30.8%, and parking driveways covered 21.2%. The Ocean View development proposal indicates an additional 8 fourplex buildings for a total of 32 more units. This is a 128% increase in density over the original approved plan of 14 more units. The same approved plan that the surrounding neighborhood accepted when they all purchased and built their homes. Seaview Villas parking required 44 spaces, 22 units and 2 cars per unit, but 60 spaces were provided, which would have allowed for 16 guest parking spaces. The Ocean View development proposal indicates a total of 64 parking spaces for 32 units, and only additional 2 spaces for guests. density. Yeah, the proposed number of buildings, 8 buildings, 32 units, is excessive for the site. In 2016, the West Sechelt Community Association could not support the Calabasas proposal of 3-story buildings. The Strongman Group agreed to reduce the buildings to 2 stories. We were very surprised to see that the density increased from 22 units to 32 units, the maximum density allowed under the current bylaws. The buildings are too close together and there is little room for green space or any landscaping. The entire site appears to consist of either buildings or pavement for parking and roadways. The proposal drawings account for approximately 12 feet 8 inches between most of the building units. It does not account for the roof lines. According to the submitted drawings, each building has a 3-foot 6-inch roof overhang. This then leaves about 5 feet 8 inches between each roof edge. The official community plan development permit area 7, multiple family residential, states multi-building developments shall provide adequate spacing between buildings to provide privacy, views, and natural light to all buildings. Openings of 5 feet 8 inches cannot provide this, and therefore the development proposal does not meet the OCP bylaw. Land grade and building height and placement. The development proposal indicates the approximate height of the buildings will be 31.7 feet. However, the proposal also indicates raising the grade of the land for some proposed building sites. During construction of the Seaview Villa Estates buildings, neighboring strata property to the west, the foundation excavation material was placed at the current proposed building sites of units B3, 4, and 5, and to some extent units B1 and 2. Ocean view construction should not occur on existing fill. Out of respect and consideration for the current neighborhood, the fill should be removed and the building should be placed lower than the current proposal. The West Sechelt Community Association insists that the building should be built upon the original grade of the land, not on fill nor raised up on existing land grades. You can see the following pictures just show where the fill was placed. Land grade and building height and placement. The roadway on Jasper from McCourt to Piccadilly Park is slanted downhill west to east. The development drawings indicate a progressive build-up from the McCourt side to the last building to the east, building B6 to B8. All the development's buildings along Jasper Road should have reduced elevation and be stepped down in accordance with the topographical contour, road grade, and be consistent with neighboring properties. Currently, proposed building unit B8 roofline will be 13.66 meters or 44.8 feet above the grade of Jasper Road, according to the plans. This is 9.45 feet higher than the previous proposed Calabasas 3-story building. And if you look at the bottom of the page, you could see that the very last building to the east will have a 13-foot retaining wall before they even start building. The following 2 pictures just show the difference between the Ocean View Villas proposal and the Seaview Villas approval, which was, you could see how on the Seaview Villa ones they've cut into the hillside. I'll just let Jamie continue on with the rest of it. Jamie?
Inappropriate land use. The need for roadway and secondary parking on this development has the developer utilizing easements and setbacks to resolve the issue. The community objects to this solution. The easement setbacks are for utility storm water management and to provide adequate spacing between adjoining properties, not for additional parking and roadways as is proposed. Additionally, some proposed parking placements have the design abutting adjoining properties and setbacks. The community takes exception to this as the developer is not considering the intended use for these portions of the development property, nor their actual ability to place these structures in some areas due to land contours and existing slope. If density were to be reduced, the required number of parking spaces would be reduced. As a result, more land would be available for green space, and there would be no need to place parking spaces in a 7.5 meter setback area. What is the plan to mitigate headlight, noise, disturbance to neighbors? Proposed parking spaces are in close proximity to neighboring residents. The exceptional parking densities will increase light noise and exhaust impacts on neighbors and the proposed units in the development. Further, the proposed drawings indicate placing post and recycling buildings into the 7.5 meter setback, contrary to the Sechelt bylaw, section 5261-B. The community objects to this proposal and is not intended to use the easement and setbacks in the approved Seaview Villa plan, did not utilize these areas for the development. Instead, easement setbacks were appropriately used for green space. Drainage. As you can see by the pictures, there's significant groundwater seeps in the development area. Additionally, the current proposal indicates very little green space and therefore insufficient water infiltration options. Official Community Plan DPA 7 multiple family residential guideline excerpts manage stormwater flows to ensure no net increase in flow volume and velocity from pre-development conditions. Use natural filtration of rainwater into the site through techniques such as rain gardens, rainwater collection systems, bioswales, landscape detention areas, and other methods suitable to the urban environment. The WSCA strongly encourages the District of Sechelt to require more green space and natural infiltration options. Further, should this development reach groundbreaking, that the DOS require the developer to provide a stormwater management plan, a plan to address property seepage, and a sediment and erosion control plan. It should be noted that during construction of Seaview Villas, water management issues and property flooding were encountered. Finally, the DOS must ensure these plans are followed during all phases of development. The DOS council and staff do not have to be reminded about developments with water seepage and their disastrous results. The land development guidelines are standards that the district staff and proponents should implement to help mitigate issues during the development of the site. Form and character. The proposed drawings indicate outside
If I could just
stairways.
ask you to wrap up your comments, because we're about at the 10-minute mark.
Okay. The stairways are on the outside of the buildings, which I believe is not part of what they should be, but I guess I'll have to go to the conclusion. The current proposal is considerably different than the previously approved Seaview Villa 2004, and complete 8 Seaview Villa units. The neighborhood understands that previous development proposals for this site are in a sense less relevant than the Planning Committee. The councillors have to keep in mind the Ocean View development is not being considered here as the first construction project in a new neighborhood, and time passed, 13 years later, this development is the final piece. And I would like to point out only one thing, that November 9th, 2017, there was a meeting with Mr. Lightbody of the MP Lightbody architect for Ocean View, and they provided information at this meeting. And the minutes indicate the discussion. It was noted that previously approved 2004 allowed more site coverage, and the information, the new proposal building footprint was to be smaller. That information is incorrect. Unfortunately, the information provided to the APC during their review of Ocean Villa's proposal was erroneous. And likewise, the recommendations the APC to approve the development permit is based on falsehoods. As a result of APC's approval and recommendation to council should be revisited or dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Booker and Mr. Sangster. Are there any questions from the committee, from the delegation?
Oh, sorry.
No, I'd just like to know that we do have full copies of your presentation as well.
Thank you.
And hopefully we've all read that. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next delegation. We don't take questions from the floor on delegations. There's a public question and answer period at the end. If you wish to stay, we'll take them then.
I think you need to understand how many of the neighbors on that encroaching property are here because they're pissed off.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to the next delegation. Ms. Joanne Rikers from the Sechelt Seniors Activity Center. If you please come up to the mic.
Mr. Chair, I'm Joanne Rikers. The presentation will be made by my colleague, Ron Atkinson.
Okay, that's permissible. And once again, just please keep your comments to 10 minutes or less. Thanks.
Thank you very much for having us, giving our presentation. This is related to a small area on the front of the proposed building at the Sechelt Senior Center and a variance application on the north side. The idea of this expansion for the building that has been presented in the past was to provide three major upgrade areas and necessities for the building. We need the kitchen to be upgraded, we need a dedicated dining room, and an increased office and administration area. The building was built in 1993. We had approximately 450 members at that time. We're up to close to 1,200 now. So the governance of the building and administration is quite different from what it was about 25 years ago. The setback on the north side of the building encompasses an area that we require for at the administration part of the building. If in fact that section was not approved, that the setback was the full current 7, whatever it is, what is it, the 7.5, thank you, it would completely obliterate that office space in that extension. It would change the whole idea of why we're moving and extending the building out, the additional amount of time, and obliterate that one major requirement. We have canvassed the surrounding neighborhood, and that's been going on for about a year when we first started in the parking variance. And we've distributed leaflets to the surrounding neighbors and invited them into open houses of information and without any negative comments. As it interesting, in fact, the conversation went away from what we're talking about and they wanted a pedestrian crosswalk access to the building, so it got off track. So we have had notices posted in our building. We've had it into our Echo, our newspaper, with very little response other than positive. We have not had negative response on this. It's interesting, the setbacks on each side of the building. I did find that we had an entry of expenditure for the first part during our 1993 construction that there was $3,324 paid out for this variance application, which must have been approved at that time, but I can't find any documentation on it other than a journal entry for that amount. So that we are in a position now asking for one more. It'd be good if we had a diagram. I guess
we will have that information too.
Okay, there's one little corner that we're talking about here, and we are pleading to have that approved so that we can extend the building as originally planned. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any questions from committee on that presentation? I actually had one. So you mentioned again that your organization has gone through some significant growth.
Yes.
Any plans in the future to find a larger facility?
No, not that I know of at all. No. What we're working to now is to better provide for the numbers that we have, and to make better use of the building, so that through this, we won't have to take the tables up and down every day for the eating area. We would have a dedicated dining area. So that would provide space in the auditorium for other ongoing use. Pickleball.
Great. Thank you. Always at the end of the day, we know pickleball is somewhere in behind all this.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So moving on to delegation number 3, Catherine Calder regarding West Porpoise Bay Estates, if you would come to the mic. And just a reminder once again that anything that's been passed along.
It's actually, Johnny's going to be the prevent. It's Johnny Ellis, we're neighbors at 5778 Marine Way.
Okay, please, if I'd have you have a seat and speak into the mic, whoever's speaking. Yeah, thanks. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for having us. We're a small delegation, the homeowners and residents of the existing property. We want to make clear from the outset that we're not here in objection to the further development. It was always part of a plan. It was assessed and approved, and that plan is not what we're objecting to. It's the scope of the increase of the plan that brings us here. We have a considerable number of concerns, some of them mainly regarding the lack of information that's available. In some cases, the information appears to be erroneous or misleading. So we feel it's very important that that a lot more assessment be done before any decision is made. The other concern that we do have is the scope, the change in scope, and the way it will affect the existing residents and buildings there. So this is mine to do, okay. So the environmental concerns that we bring forth is really, again, there's not enough information to just approve this thing as it stands, because we know that we have wildlife corridors through there. We see deer and bear and coyote through there. There's eagle nests, there's songbirds, we have hummingbirds all over the place. This is a very well-inhabited stretch of wooded land that is used for nesting and rearing habitat of mammals and birds. And this project, as it's proposed, would cut that corridor right off. The setback down at the waterfront is very, very steep, non-navigable for the migration of the wildlife through there. So that the only place left would be a place that they could not cross. So it's important that we think that a lot more information be gathered on the effects to the environment. There's also reportedly eelgrass down below, which is very important in the herring, in the life cycle of the herring. And so again, that's not very clear that that's ever been really established, what the effects of that would be. And the slopes are fairly extreme. Looking at the proposal, the geotechnical engineers report states slopes of 10 to 70%, I believe. The 10% slopes are actually fairly rare there. We're looking at slopes of on the construction sites. We're looking at slopes well above 30, and again, that needs to be studied and looked at considerably more than has been. This picture is just showing that we've got You're looking at the same one over there, good. So we've got an eagle nest there that brings us to another thing that needs to be done is the tree assessment. We have wildlife trees. We have known wildlife trees on this property. A tree protection plan has never been done or submitted to the best of our knowledge. And that would be another thing that would very strongly need to be looked at. Now, again, this is just referring to the tree protection plan that we brought up. So work has already been, land has been cleared. You can see the shallowness of the soil there. It's an area that, according to the OCP, rock outcropping, steep slopes, environmentally significant places need to be protected, and we're not certain that that's being done adequately here. Now, this is the one that I could speak on this for an hour. I wish we had the kind of time. On the right side of the photograph is the existing buildings. There's I measured it last night, actually. There's a 3 meters between the building and the wall, the retaining wall, right below this, where this road is built. This road is no more than 6 meters wide. So, and then the building here begins immediately after. So that leaves a spacing of 10 meters. Now, this also is the conceptual drawing here. On the left is the conceived buildings. They do not. This drawing does not accurately represent the proposal. This shows, in perspective, it looks as though the heights are lower, when in fact, according to the proposal, they are higher, and an upcoming slide will demonstrate that. Now, the other thing, the thing that's very concerning here is with these buildings, the height as they are, as close to, in proximity to the existing buildings, and the densities being brought in that we're talking about in the new development, we're talking about 90 units. The amount of traffic through there would result in real severe increase in emissions, vehicle emissions and dust. The proximity of these buildings would not allow adequate airflow through, and so we would have our air quality in this area seriously affected by that. Also, the light, there would be a very extremely affected light. And what makes this really significant is that these buildings, the existing buildings, were designed and approved, constructed, and marketed with everything on this view side, everything on the ocean side, all of the living spaces. And if you look at this photograph on the right side, you see this is all the master bedrooms, all of the living spaces, kitchens, everything is oriented towards that side. On the other side of the buildings, there's very little light. There's some windows, not very big, bathroom windows. So the light that we count on is on this side. The air that we breathe is on this side. As this road was being paved, there was a truck idled out there. It was 100 degrees out. I couldn't close my window, and I was breathing diesel fumes the entire time I was cooking. That shows just how that air moves inside this area, and if you increase this, the traffic here by anywhere up to 300%, our air quality is going to be seriously affected. Our privacy is going to be seriously affected. We have no opportunity to get away from the windows. This is how this place was built and approved. And so the original design of it was all around this. Now, the original design for these new buildings had the building heights level with the top of the rock wall. And that's what we're not objecting to. That seemed like a very reasonable plan at the time that the houses were, that the whole plan was approved and constructed, in that it allows light, it doesn't affect privacy, it allows continued air quality. So this is the most important one from the point of view of the residents. Here, we're looking at the proposal with the heights, and you can see that the height of the building is considerably higher. Now, the conceptual drawing shows the building right on the road. Now we're looking at a sloped part. So again, they're not reflective. The two things are very unclear as to just how crowded and the severity of the effect. Though I don't believe there's any question about the effect, it's the severity of it that we're looking at.
Chairman, just one small comment. You referencing the existing buildings as being on the right.
I'm sorry?
You've been.
I have, okay,
Yeah,
yes,
so
you are
just a small-
correct.
Yeah, just
Thank
small
you very
correction.
much.
In an existing building.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
no problem. No problem.
Thank you for that
Just
point
wanted
of clarity.
clarification of
Yes,
that.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what was originally assessed and originally approved, designed, and constructed. This is this conforms, the original plan conforms to this kind of space. Now we're looking at 4-story buildings with underground parking that would essentially tower over this thing, and the road in the diagram here, this is on the other side. So this is the water side, and this is the not the water side. It's got a very big, wide boulevard for a driveway. It's actually quite lovely, except that it's really not designed to look out the back.
Okay, if I could just ask you to wrap up your comments.
Okay.
You're nearing the end of your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm afraid that that I have to skip some of this, but you do have
Yes, we
these,
do. We've
okay, and
received
so
those materials.
and so we would like very much for you to give this a very good looking over. This is the one for wrapping up. Thank you. No, here. Sorry. So we believe that this project potentially has some negative impacts. And these are to the wildlife and environment, the space between the buildings, our air quality, circulation, and our privacy, natural light, shadows, views and viewscapes. And in viewscapes, we're referring to how this appears from the water looking upward, not just from our place looking outward. The existing character of the development is a strong one. This is what it looks like now on the back side. These are the entrances, and you know, this is a lovely little boulevard and driveway, and the other side does not look like that in the least. It's quite crowded and very uncomfortable feeling. So, sorry I'm jumping around. I'm just trying to get to the end here for us. And the structural integrity of the existing buildings is also a concern. The engineers, the geotechnical engineer report does refer to land movement, and we need to be assured that there's going to be no damage during whatever construction happens there. There's no indication that has been assessed, and there's a plan for it. So we feel a whole bunch of things need to be looked at. The tree protection needs to be looked at. Traffic impact assessment needs to be looked at. Going up to 90 units is a lot of vehicles coming off of a very small artery on a sharp corner. It's going to be problematic. Air quality, we would like an air quality assessment done along that road that's referred to as Road B in the proposal. As I mentioned right at the start, the environmental concerns there doesn't appear to be enough information around environmental concerns and environmental impact in order to approve without having a much better environmental assessment done. The road width.
I'm going to have to stop you there. We're out of time. Thanks.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments, though. Any questions from committee on this delegation?
Thank you, Angela.
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our final delegation of the day. Thanks, everyone, for being patient. 3.4, Joanne Gadsby regarding Ocean View Villas. If you please come to the mic. And once again, just a reminder that 10 minutes is the limit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen.
And if I could have you speak into the mic, please.
I am the original developer of Seaview Villa Estates, Phase 1. Phase 1 I'm extremely proud of, had a great team, and I'm here in support of
If I could just have you speak into the mic, please.
any Phase 1 owners who are here. I'm also having had an opportunity over the weekend to look at the drawings submitted on the Strongman Development site. I'm also here in support of the West Sechelt Community Association. But I'm also here, as I say, I'm president and sole shareholder of Seaview Villa Estates. I purchased the land. I wanted to give you some background.
Just a reminder, you're speaking to committee.
Okay,
so
sorry.
if you could please have a seat.
I purchased the development property in 2005, and I'm also the former owner of the show home, number 13, in Phase 1. This was to become a second home for my family. I live in North Vancouver. The property, what happened to me and why is simply this. After I paid back the Royal Bank their $2.588 million from Phase 1, the global crisis hit. And I went back to get financing through the major banks. They were not lending, in spite of the fact that the major banks got $114 billion in bailouts through the Canadian government. In other words, as a long-term successful businesswoman, I was hung to dry. I put the development up for sale, or I was looking for a joint venture partnership and financing. Financing was just not available. But the fact is that, and this may not be of interest to you, but I have $3,026,000 invested in that site to the end of December. What I wanted to also mention is that I met with Mayor Milne and one of the former acting directors of development in May of 2016. The property was sold through foreclosure against my strong protestations. It should not have been sold because I had put together a joint venture agreement with another major, highly credible long-term developer, and we were trying to get a 30-day adjournment in the court to complete that. But I did also want to bring to your attention that I did have meetings with Mr. Strongman and his father, and I was very concerned. I had approached them about possibly buying, and this goes back to 2011. Referral to them came from MLA from West Vancouver. Met with them and gave them a lot of confidential information. Now, this may not be of interest to you, but the point here, and I wanted to mention this, is that last communications with Mark Strongman were that this is not the right site for us. If we find somebody, we'll let you know. He did not get back to me. There is litigation pending against Mark Strongman and the Strongman Group, which may not be relevant to the land use planning here, but it is a fact, and it's a public document filed in the BC Supreme Court as of August the 4th, 2017. The other reason I'm here before the committee, the committee and members of the community, is I had hoped to make this as a home for my family, but as I say, it's left a very bad taste in my mouth right now. But I also wanted to clarify some misleading publicity in respect to Seaview Villa Estates. Seaview did not go bankrupt, nor did it need to go bankrupt. Number two, I bought the property from the original owner, which was Norwest Bay Developments, who developed the whole raw land for the site.
Ma'am, if I could just remind you that
Yep.
we're here to deal with the issues related to a development permit, and we're not here to deal with business.
I realize that. Now, in respect to the architect's documents, late body, but he didn't mention reference to the fact that Seaview had succumbed to foreclosure due to the large size of units. That's not true. Seaview did redesign, and Seaview did have an approved development permit for 31 units within the existing site. What has happened here is Phase 1 owners are asking to sever the property, and quite frankly, if I were in the position, I'd be doing the same thing. And the end result is you have a massive, extensive massing of units, minimal open space, reduced architectural design, including outside stairs with units planned, landscaping not in keeping with the form and character of and the high quality of Seaview's Phase 1. My comments here, I had sent through to the Director of Development. I did expect him to be on the internet. They did not get there, just 2 paragraphs, which are the 2 paragraphs that are on the screen. They were sent through on the Thursday, further comments after I studied the design drawings over the weekend, but the report did not get into the internet. I do have copies of my full statement and pictures of Seaview's Phase 1 and an aerial view of the site. I'm proud of what we did with Seaview Phase 1. I, in fact, was looking, and I'm still looking at possibly
you're presenting
buying.
to the committee.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm still looking at possibly buying in the area, but I am very upset at what I see because I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into Seaview's Phase 1, and the remaining site deserves similar treatment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for this presenter? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to committee minutes. Minutes of Planning and Community Development, item 4.1, the meeting of January 24th, for receipt. Mover and a seconder, Lutz and Seegers. Any amendments to note? Questions? No? All those in favor? And that's carried. Minutes of the Advisory Planning Commission for receipt, January 11th. Moved and seconded, Seegers and Lutz. Any discussion or corrections? Not seeing none. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to the business items of today. The first one is Seaview Villas, item 6.1, report by the community planner. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Aaron Thompson, will you be making the presentation today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a presentation. It is a fairly straightforward report, but if council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, so we have recommendation number 2 still to be moved. Do we have any questions from committee on the report?
I'll move recommendation 2.
Okay. Moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lutz. Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? Wait, speak to it first, okay.
Thank you. Question for staff. My understanding of this recommendation here is that because the pieces of property are going to be separated, this needs to go forward in order to have that happen. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from committee? Councillor Shanks.
So what's the next step?
Yeah.
That'd be my question. I do have comment, though. As is my custom, I try and look at these new developments coming on stream, and I paid a visit to this particular site and a vacant lot, which is up on Samron Road between 2 other existing houses. And looking at the comments that have been made by those people that have concerns about it, and seeing the density increase by virtually 50% with the restrictions imposed on that development in terms of green space, parking, so forth and so on, I would be voting against this moving forward.
Okay, so just a reminder, Councillor Shanks, that we're dealing with a variance permit for the neighboring property, and we'll be moving on to that part next. Further comment from Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. This proposal here is for the current property so that we can actually look at what we want to have on the other one. Unless this one goes forward, the other one's not happening at all. Is that correct?
Yes, to the committee. It would be another process that have to look at the lot lines that have to be adjusted, and that would be a much more in-depth legal process that they have to go through as well as another type of subdivision.
Does that suffice? Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I'll jump in here with my own comment. To me, the reduction from 3 to 1.5 represents a large change for something that's pretty much a standard in all types of construction throughout the district. 1.5 meters is simply not enough in between from 2 lot lines to a dwelling. And additionally to an accessory dwelling from 1 meter to 0.4. There are important reasons why we have those setbacks, and I would not be in favor of relaxing them. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Question to staff. If this would have continued forward as one development, would these setbacks probably would not have been an issue?
They would not have.
It's because we're actually separating it into 2 separate pieces, 2 separate stratas, 2 separate properties.
Correct.
That they're non-conforming.
Yes.
If they stayed as one, it would have been conforming as presented.
They would just have to meet the building code for fire separation requirements.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the variance is to allow the property as presented to be developed as a multifamily property.
Yes.
With setbacks that would allow the whole thing to look as one rather than 2 separate.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. For any further comments from committee? Okay, seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's defeated. Okay, moving on to item 6.2, Ocean View Villas Development Permit, report by the community planner. Question before we move ahead from Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Given we have not approved that, is there even any point in talking about this next one?
This development permit would have to be redesigned if council does look at not approving the variance, as the setbacks would likely have to be increased and the lot lines moved. So it would have to be revised, but yeah.
So I would suggest that at this point we defer the second one or refer it back to staff until the first one comes to council and we see what happens at the council level.
Is that workable with staff? Are they comfortable with that?
And we can't vote,
Yes.
we can't discuss and vote on this because we don't have a proposal that currently will work.
Yeah. Yes.
Director of Planning.
If I may, Mr. Chair, there may be some merit, given that the people are here, of going through and identifying a number of the issues, of getting some things clarified on it, would actually help the applicant in moving forward if it does need to be revised. So I would see some value in actually having a more fruitful discussion
Yeah,
at
I
this
tend to
time.
agree with that. I was leaning towards that myself. So then we'll move ahead and we'll deal with item 6.2 today, knowing full well that there may be changes to this as it moves ahead. So, second, all those in favor? And that's carried. So, Mr. Aaron Thompson, your presentation.
Thank you. So yes, this is the development permit application from 1042635 BC Limited for the Ocean View Villas project. So everyone's on the same page, here's the location of the subject property, located at the intersection of McCourt Road and Jasper in West Sechelt. So a bit of the background, the property is zoned R4 with an OCP designation of multifamily / mixed residential, and it falls within development permit area 7, multiple family residential. Previously, there wasn't development permit issued on this property, development permit 2004-10, which allowed for the construction of 11 duplexes. However, only phase 1 was ever constructed, which was 4 duplexes. So what this proposal is for our 32-unit townhouse development contained within 8 buildings, and the zoning allows for a maximum of 32 units. The building heights range from 6.6 meters to 9.92 meters in building height, while the maximum is 10.5 meters. And this building height is measured from the average natural grade to the midpoint of the roof, which was a bit of a different measurement than how the previous duplex units would have been measured. This project features 64.9% lot coverage, including buildings, parking, and driveways, while the zoning allows for 75% lot coverage. And it has provides 64 parking stalls, while the minimum is 64 parking stalls. There are some additional guest parking as well, I believe, two. So here you can see the proposed site plan. So you have the 8 buildings located here, 2 up here that mainly accessed off of McCourt Road, with the 6 remainder here down with the main access coming off of Jasper Road. You can also see here there are 2 different unit types. This unit and this unit are slightly different design than the other units, but mainly they are very similar in nature. Here you can see the elevation of the building. It is a 2-story building with quite a similar form to the existing strata that's neighboring it. Here you can kind of see how the proposal fits within the existing streetscapes and how it would look. So this would be what it would look like from McCourt Road, the side view. You can see building B1, which would be the most furthest north building, and then you can see how the existing strata with the new buildings behind it. And this one would be located on looking at it from Jasper Road, and you can see how those elevations fit in with, again, the existing character and size of the buildings going down. And here are some renderings of the buildings, again, showing some of the colors that they're showing and how it, again, fits in. So yeah, you can see there's the color variation as well that was proposed by the Advisory Planning Commission and accepted by the applicant. So the analysis of this project, the proposal is consistent with the R4 zoning in terms of what is allowed. And the proposal does meet the intent and the majority of the DPA guidelines. Specifically, it meets well with the kind of the form and character aspects, the site planning, and as well, the kind of only one real failing area is the open space, which I highlighted a little bit more in my report in detail. This is a difficult site to work with, and the applicant has tried to seek a balance between meeting the DPA guidelines, fitting to the existing character of the neighborhood, as well as just the restrictions on the site. There has been previous talks about restricting the height to 2 stories rather than going to 3 stories, which of course then expands building footprints to compensate for that, as well as just the odd shape of the site in general being kind of a P shape looking out from a court road that has to have access going through it and connecting to going through the existing strata roads, which was previously in the previous plan. So those kind of restrictions have made it a very difficult site to develop. As well as one thing to note is that the proposal does rely on getting an easement from the existing strata for access over a portion of the property. That would also be where the garbage and refuse building is located for access and some shared servicing between them. I believe mostly stormwater management. So my recommendation is that the proposed development permit be approved, subject to being developed in accordance with the provided drawings, that we receive a landscaping bond for the proposed landscaping. But that prior to the issuance of a development permit, that the easement for those access and shared services be registered on all the affected titles to ensure that that is in place before it can be developed. Is there any questions?
So that concludes your report then?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'll look to committee, see if committee has any questions. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, could I once again see the elevation picture on Jasper Road, please, with regards to the new units? Just before that, I think.
Yeah, it's just going a little slow.
Okay. So there's a fairly substantial retaining wall on the three end units. Is that correct?
Yeah, there would be some retaining walls. It is terraced back, so it's, I believe it's 2 retaining walls there.
Do we know the height of those?
Not off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Just if I could follow up and jump off on that question from Councillor Shanks. So clearly there's some type of buildup. There was a question raised by our delegation in terms of fill that had been added to that site. And of course, District of Sechelt has a long-standing policy of maintaining the topography, natural topography of any site when building. So how does that fit in with this?
Well, the heights are measured from the average grade. So that would be measured without any fill or anything placed on it. So when I quoted those height numbers previously, those are based off the average natural grade, looking at the various corners of the building and how it fits on the slope. So
is that average natural grade from the top of the lot to the far bottom side, or is it per building?
It's per building.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. We did get the presentation from Mr. Sangster and Ms. Petker, I believe, which refutes, it's actually counter to a lot of the information that's presented in your report. When this comes forward, I would like to actually see this, reflected, so we see how these questions and concerns are addressed. I also noticed that we have a report from MP Lightbody as well that has addressed some of the concerns that were in here. So at this point, I can't really comment on it because there's a lot of discrepancy between the two, and I'd like to just see how you've addressed what they've got in here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course, a staff report takes precedence over anything coming from the community. We know that. However, if you'd like to provide any comment on some of the items raised in the previous presentation, I'll give you the opportunity now.
I don't believe so at this time. Everything that I've presented in my report, to the best of my knowledge, is factual. So,
thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I understand, you've put all the information in there. There's obviously some misunderstanding in the community or some misinformation out in the community. So I think we need to address that before we take this any further. Because it's obvious that we have 2 different views on this project at this time. So that's why I'm looking at having this information addressed. Thanks.
Further questions from committee? I had one, I'll jump in here now, and it's the question about the building on easements, which I didn't really see dealt with. Can we raise that?
Yes, I did address that in my report. There are no easements on the property. There is, the only charges on title are for some statutory rights away for BC Hydro and gas.
So can we raise the lot layout once again?
It disappeared. Michelle, can you please bring it back up? Yeah.
So regarding the utility corridor that's been discussed on the, I guess that would be northern edge of the property?
There is none.
So what's represented there is just the setback?
Just the setback.
Okay, and so there's to be some roadway and parking spaces constructed in the setback?
Yes.
Right, yeah, it's labeled there. You want to deal with the accessory building?
That's, there is actually a plan to, as part of the servicing, as part of the easement for the shared servicing between the strata, the owner is looking to share that use of that existing building as is more than satisfactory for the existing strata. And they were looking at not having to actually construct that secondary building.
Okay, thanks for that. Further questions from committee? Of course, we know that the previous motion was defeated. Seaview Villa is the development variance permit, but of course that can be rejigged in small ways. So dealing with this, getting our first look at it, it's important that we get all of our questions out. If committee has further questions. So I'll jump in once again. The stormwater management issue that was raised. We've seen some pictures come through about seepage coming off that property. Is that of a concern?
Yeah, we are looking at addressing it at the time of the servicing agreement. Stormwater management and silt control plans are usually handled at that more advanced design stage. They do have a civil engineer who is working on it currently.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would address any of the stormwater seepage concerns on the property.
Councillor Shanks with a further question.
I think you're still trying to elicit input here on this whole thing taking place. So the reason I brought up the Jasper Road elevation situation, and I believe the elevation could be considerable depending on who we're going to believe. But the fact is, if those properties were based at grade, it would directly impact those properties sitting in behind them, all the way up the hill to Samron Road. So that's a consideration that I would like personally addressed, because I think that is one of the things where there is opposition to creating a false level of the elevation of those new units going in place. So if that's something that can be looked at, then I think it should be looked at.
Okay. So this one that we're dealing with here today is the strata. So is that correct? We're dealing with the strata?
Sorry.
Proposed development is a strata?
Yes, it would be a strata, yes.
So in our policies then, do we consider the averaging of slopes to exist across the entire strata, or is it just per building?
It's per building.
Okay. And we're certain about that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Further questions from committee? Councillor Seegers.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I got everybody out of order there. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I'd agree with Councillor Shanks that we need to look at the height of the building. I do note that according to your report, everything else actually follows it's all in line with the zoning for the property. So the community's concerned about the height. They're also concerned about lot coverage. Lot coverage is in line.
Yes.
So I think we need to look at the heights, and perhaps we can look at the rest of it later on down the road. I don't have a concern personally with the lot coverage. When we look at multifamily, we do need this kind of multifamily in our community. We have lots of people who are looking for places to live. So I would support the coverage, the density, but the height is something that the neighbors are concerned about because of their views and what they were anticipating was going to be built on the property. So I think we need to address that.
Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, I was around when the first phase of this development went in, and subsequently had to do appraisals on some of the particular units. And those fronting on Jasper Road, to the best of my knowledge, were constructed at grade. Because if memory serves again, we had 8 to 9 foot concrete walls in the basement as you were going basically up McCourt Road. So I would just like to see that sort of thing maintained throughout the lower development, especially fronting Jasper Road.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from committee? Okay, so maybe I'll just take some direction from staff on this one. We've had the previous motion, which is related, fail. And how would we like to leave this to deal with other discussions with the developer? Suspending the debate is something that would allow you the room to do that? Or would you like to refer?
You could table it until the further discussion is had.
Okay. Motion to table. Moved and seconded. Tabling to some future date, unspecified. All those in favor? And that's carried. So I know there's a lot of people here, so I'll just deal with that question now. It's been tabled till a future time because the previous 6.1 item that dealt with the setback variance for the previous strata has not gone through, so there's going to need to be some reworking before anything can go ahead at this point. So I'm sure you'll be in touch with our planning department, and they'll be in touch with you regarding a future date when it comes back. So at this point, the debate has been suspended. Thanks. Okay, moving on. Item 6.3, Spectrum of Care Official Community Plan Amendment. Report by the community planner. Motion to receive. Moved and seconded. Seegers and Lutz. All those in favor? And that's carried. We'll just give everyone a moment who wants to leave to leave.
For those of you that are here from the Ocean View Estates, that if you wish to carry on discussions, you do it in the library or outside. But the folks here want to carry on their.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, we're gonna just move on to the next item. So we'll have a report from the community planner, Mr. Aaron Thompson. Feel free to begin when you feel it's quiet enough. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yes. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the report regarding the Official Community Plan Amendment 492-21-2017, the Spectrum of Care. So this is the first time bringing us back to Planning Committee after doing all the public consultation and research for the Spectrum of Care OCP amendment to provide the committee with the first look at the proposed bylaw and kind of discuss some of the highlights going forward of what staff has tried to do with it. So in general, I want to really start off with what we are going to be looking at as the statement of intent of this OCP amendment and how we're recommending that the district handle these types of facilities in the future. So the real intent is to provide for flexibility that is required to provide residents with facilities that allow for aging in comfort, security, and dignity, while still respecting the existing neighborhood character and good planning
I'm just going to have to stop you there. Can we have the people in the back that are talking, please? Could you move outside and continue your conversation? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Okay. Yes. So we're looking at having that flexibility while still respecting the existing neighborhood character and good planning principles. So overall, what this proposed amendment does is greatly increases the flexibility OCP does have when it comes to the various care options and facilities. Without going into the full detail of the amendment, just some of the highlights, we are changing some of the policies and definitions, taking out some of the specifics, and just to allow greater flexibility and a broader range of where these facilities can be located, and while at the same time making sure that they fit within the existing neighborhood. For kind of the medium to larger scale facilities, that would mean that they'd be built to the similar densities, the similar form of what the underlying designation is, but allowing them in a greater range of designations. So we're opening it up from what was once considered essentially the civic institutional designation to allowing them in more multifamily neighborhood centers, the downtown center, as long as they fit within that underlying density and form. For smaller scale facilities, now these might be facilities with one or two operators carrying, less than 10 people or maybe less than 5. They might be small licensed facilities. We want to even further allow this expanse to allow for greater options and to kind of support these smaller scale providers that may even just go unnoticed currently in our community, as well as just kind of statements of support for these home-based levels of care. As well as part of the amendment, I am proposing some implementation strategies, a lot that can be done as part of our zoning bylaw review. And that includes allowing for all these small-scale facilities in residential zones, in existing residential zones, so they wouldn't have to go through rezoning if they wanted to. And then through the zoning, adding some more of the specific definitions around the various types of care facilities. And that might be looking at the difference between assisted care, independent supported living, et cetera. What we have heard a lot as well is looking at combining these uses into one facility. That was something quite commonly heard through our consultation process. And those are the kind of things that we might want to consider as part of a rezoning. As well as part to also add the density bonusing framework into the zoning bylaw. That it does mention it into the in the OCP, but doesn't actually express that into the implementation strategy. So my recommendations are that the Efficient Community Plan Amendment be given first reading. That then council would consider this Efficient Community Plan Amendment in conjunction with its financial plan, waste management plans, and liquid waste management plans. And then that staff be authorized to schedule a public hearing for this after we send out an invitation and the accompanying staff report to the organizations and individuals that we have previously considered that would be affected by it, to invite them to either submit additional comments on the proposed amendment or to attend the public hearing. So yeah, is there any questions? And this is a picture from the e-town hall that we had. So,
thank you, Mr. Thompson, for your presentation. So just to be clear, this is OCP amendment, so there will be a public hearing. If we decide to send this forward to council, at this point, we'd be asking committee if they have any questions, edits, or suggestions around the basic package that you've seen. Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I'll move recommendation number 2.
Okay. So just to be clear, you're prepared to move item 2 and you want to discuss 3 and 4 separately? And that's fine. Okay. Okay, so recommendation number 2 has been moved. Is it seconded? Councillor Shanks. Any discussion at this point? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that's carried. We still have recommendation 3 and 4. Do I have a mover for either of those or both?
3.
I see Councillor Lutz with item number 3. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Seegers. Any discussion at this point? Councillor Seegers.
I don't know where my questions kind of fit into these different things you've got here. Let me get back. I'm on page 221. That's actually in the bylaw that I had some questions. Sorry, I have to get back there now. Okay, so in the bylaw, 5.13.2, it indicates that spectrum of care facilities and uses must comply with the base density, maximum density, typical heights, and typical building form of the land use designation in which they are located, and is generally shown on figure 7. I didn't see a figure 7. And then where appropriate, spectrum of care facilities should utilize the FAR, right, for the measuring density. So a couple of questions around this. We're talking in here about spectrum of care facilities in civic, institutional, utilities areas, downtown center, neighborhood center, or regional center designations. I don't know where those are in our community.
okay.
So, I think as a community, if we're looking at doing this bylaw, we would need that information presented so that we know what we're talking about when it comes to this. Or what is the impact of bringing something like this forward? Can we redesignate as residential center or et cetera? Those sorts of questions need to be incorporated into this material that's brought forward. Okay. 5.13.8 as well. I just think there's some wording missing in the first sentence. It's containing something or supported in the neighborhood center, downtown center. So that would need to be completed before it comes back to council as well. Those are my only questions and concerns. Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on recommendation number 3? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, recommendation number 4, that staff be authorized to schedule a public hearing for the community plan amendment bylaw. Moved, seconded, Leeds and Seegers. Any discussion at this point? Oh, I just wanted to offer some general comments before we vote. Is that I was quite happy with the work that I saw done here. Of course, we're going to get feedback but from the community. This is an important OCP amendment and something that I expect a lot of people are going to be very interested in. The Seniors Planning Table has done some fantastic work in our community in terms of getting us ready for this, and we know in terms of our demographics that this is something that we need to deal with, and so I like how it's being dealt with. I'm definitely in favor of moving it forward. Councillor Seegers for comment.
Thank you. I want to compliment you, Aaron, and the planning staff for the work that you did. The public engagement was very well done, and we had good support and good feedback from the community. So thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, all those in favor? And that carries. Moving on to item 6.4. Mobius Architecture and Seashelt Seniors Activity Center Development Variance Permit and Development Permit. Report from the community planner for receipt. Moved and seconded. Lutz and Shanks. All those in favor? And that's carried. Ms. Letman, the municipal planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We're here today to look at a development variance permit application. I'll do a short presentation. Oh, not too far. Here, the location you can see is on the corner of Sherlock Lane and Trail Avenue. It's represented by the star. The official community plan designation is the blue part, is civic, institutional, and utilities area. The current zoning is PA1, institutional, and it supports the use that it currently has in terms of assembly as well as institution. Just going back 1 second here, you can see that the setbacks that are allowable are 7.5 meters from every lot line. In terms of the application, we have the existing aerial photograph that shows the building in its current configuration. Existing photographs showing the front of the building. This outlines where the area is of the variance. It's in exactly this area here. So the building was constructed. There's no notice of a variance for this purpose registered on title. So staff didn't look further back than that because it's not registered. Every variance and development permit needs to be registered on title. So we're not sure what happened in 1992. But we know that the building was placed there. And at this point, in order to do the extension across the front of the building, they need to have a variance for that small corner in yellow. So the proposal, this is what it would look like across the front. Would be looking from the townhouse development. This is the north elevation that faces the townhouses, and it shows you the area of the variance addition. Again, from the west elevation to the front, looking at that section. Oh, and we'll just, let's go back one. Again, that's the development variance area. It's approximately 5.5 meters in length. And the reduction in the setback, the recommendation is that the setback be reduced from 7.5 meters to 3 meters for a maximum height of 1 story for the Seashelt Seniors Activity Center. And that only after the official notification to neighboring property owners and residents within 50 meters have been completed. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee.
Thank you. So I'll look to committee if they have any questions. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Given the building is constructed inside that setback now, that is grandfathered, or do we need to actually do anything with regards to a variance for that piece on title?
The way the recommendation is worded, it is not specific to that length of 5.5 meters. So it would apply to the entire site. But if you wish to make it only for that corner, it could be, and the other part is grandfathered at this point.
I was just wondering how it would be legitimized, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could make a real point of legitimizing the entire part, but this motion does that in effect.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Lutz.
I'll move recommendation 2A and B.
Okay, we have a seconder. Any discussion of that before we vote? Okay, I think I'll jump in with a comment, but I have further others, but this one is relatively benign, in my opinion, setback reduction. Obviously, it's of a one-story of an existing building, and it doesn't impact views of the neighboring properties, but I am curious to see what comes back for notification. So I'm curious from our staff, at what point in the process then would those notifications become part of the
We actually sent out the
council?
notifications last Friday. So it will be coming forward, and all of the neighbors within 50 meters, the neighboring residents as well as property owners within 50 meters have been notified that council will be considering it next Wednesday, March 7th at 7 p.m.
So the onus is then on property owners who feel their interests are affected to contact council with their concerns?
Yes, we give them a basic overview, but at the front counter we have the full report available, and certainly staff can meet with them to give them more information if they require it.
Thank you. No further questions from committee. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, thanks for that. Moving forward, item 6.5, West Porpoise Bay Estates, development permit and development variance permit application. Report by the municipal planner, Angela Letman. Do I have a mover for receipt? Moved and seconded, Lutz and Shanks. All those in favor? That's carried. Ms. Letman.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask the director to pass this around. These are the samples of the sample board of the finishes for the application. And moving on to the next. So I'd just like to draw the first slide is about the location. The location is in the area of a lot of multifamily development along Marine Way. This property here is the Mackenzie Marina. You have the existing Blue Northern 3 buildings, and there's a 4th building that is the first phase of this next development that has already occurred. The official community plan feature land use designation is multifamily mixed residential. That supports the application. The base density for that designation is 50 units per hectare, and this proposal is under that density. In terms of development permit areas, the ones that are indicated here are number 3, which is environmental. You can see along the marine foreshore area here, as well as number 4, which is the reddish purple. And number 5 is the steep slopes, the green. And so you can see that most of the site that's under the development is in these areas. What we have, the development though, is outside, the actual site of the development is outside of the area of number 3. Therefore, we have not requested a development permit area environmental study, since that area is to be left alone. But we are making that recommendation that that area be covenanted as such as well. The current zoning is R4, multifamily residential, which supports apartments at a rate of 1 per 200 square meters of area. And this is well within this the proposal is for 1 unit at 220 square meters. So that meets that zoning. And we'll go into the other parts of it. In terms of property history, the original subdivision of the property happened in 1987. We believe the zoning happened in the early 1980s, since there was evidence in the village of Sechelt zoning bylaw that it was already at that time zoned R4 apartments at a rate of 1 per 110 square meters of area. Currently, as I said, for the R4 for this area is 1 per 200. In 2008, there was a registered Form P drawing that was done, and this is coming out of the registered Form P, which is a phase strata plan. Things I would like to point out is that there were originally 16 buildings, only 3 of which were to be 2 stories. The remainder were to be 3 stories in height, slab on grade. So 3 stories, except for this one, and this one. The remainder were all 3 stories, slab on grade. So, hitting the wrong button, I'm sorry. This is phase 1, phase 2, and I believe this is phase 11 of the original 16 buildings, of which there was be 69 units overall. So what was constructed since that time in 2008 was number 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one was left uncompleted for quite some time, and I believe this council saw this come in last year and was finished, phase 4. It has 9 units in it. Since that time, the next strata, all of the strata owners had looked at and it signed off on a change to the Form P. And the new Form P got registered in 2017. So every property owner in the original strata signed that document. And we have here the new part, which talks about that there are an additional 80 units over and above what are already constructed. So there were 10 units here, 9 here, and we're talking about an additional 80 over top of what is already constructed. In essence, the property is now one on its own. The stratas have taken a division between themselves, similar to what you're seeing at Ocean View Villas is proposed, so that the developer can go on and continue to develop. They're looking at 7 phases, of which the final building, which will be building what we're going to refer to in the drawings as Building 10, will occur in 2030. I'm going to talk about zoning bylaw height and how we measure height. So the zoning bylaw talks about height as being for buildings other than single and 2-family dwellings, the distance measured vertically along the projected line of the face of the buildings from the grade to the highest point of the roof, surface of a flat roof, or to the mean level between the eaves and ridges of a gable, hip, or other sloping roof, and in the case of a structure without a roof, to the highest point of the structure. And that's from the average grade. So the grade talks about that the grades means the average natural elevation prior to any regrading, subdivision, or construction, as measured around the perimeter of the proposed building footprint, or directly below its outermost exterior walls. So this emphasizes your question earlier about it is for each building at the perimeter of the building. So this is a slide that was showing the perimeter of the building, showing a typical example of how we could measure on a steep slope. Take the 4 corners, you take the average, and then you draw it in a section looking at a building sketch section of how that works. So you can see on a steep slopes, the steeper the grade, the less you end up having in terms of elevation available to you. So I'm going to run through now. So the applicant has provided, and you have it in your package, a drawing that indicates all of the average grade calculations. This is an area that's showing the sections, and then we start to look at the actual sections of the buildings. So this is building number 5, which is the one directly below number 4, which is currently constructed. And you can see here I've added the slide in that from later on in the drawing package that shows the relationship to the adjoining neighboring buildings. So this is the phase 4 building, the most recent building that was constructed with 9 units. And this will be building number 5. Building number 6, very similar. You can see that the pink lines show the natural, the level of average natural grade and the actual height, and then the difference is the variance that they're requesting, which is this number in here. And you have a chart that shows all of those additional heights they're looking for. Again, this is building 6 in relationship to the building number 4. Building number 7. Each building has a different ratio of height that they're asking for, different variance because of the location, the change in geography, and there are basically 2 building types so that you'll see in a moment. So we're moving now into buildings number 7 to 10. They are 3 stories of residential apartments with underground parking, and that underground parking will be accessed directly from Marine Way and not using the existing strata roads. So this is the building 7 again, in relationship to the building that's already there, the neighboring building. And on this one, you can see it again. Building 8, again, it's just shifting because of the topography. Number 9, we're working our way closer to Marine Way now. And the difference is the grade actually gets a little less steep in this area. Therefore, the amount of variance required on buildings 9 and 10 is less. And again, here you can see building 10, the last building, and its relationship to its neighboring property. I'm going to keep going and then we'll get to the end and we'll look at the recommendations overall. This is a roof plan showing the site plan of the essence of the buildings. You can see here that there will be actually connectors at the underground level of the parking. So the entrance for the parking will be through here. This is moving down to closer to the grade level. You can see the parking in this section. Oops, sorry. More parking is provided here and some here, and there's some as well over there. Overall, parking is exceeded in terms of the requirements that it's met. They only actually have to provide 1 accessible parking space. They're providing 6. This whole project, while we're on the topic of accessibility, every building will have an elevator and all the units will be adaptable, and there'll be level access from the Marine Way through the complex into these buildings. So that last one was the underground parking plan. The buildings type 1s, which are buildings 5 and 6, there's a basic floor plan. And then we'll move into elevations. The pattern of stone, I think I've passed around the panel. Sorry, I jumped there. This is what it would look like from the ocean side. And the side panels. Oh, it's jumping, I'm sorry. Moving on to building type 2, a basic layout. This would be the elevation facing the neighboring buildings along that common access driveway. Again, from the lower side, what those buildings will look like in the building type 2, typical buildings. This is the black hole here is the underground parking connection. And you can see that there is, since the developer has over time, the applicant brought in more and more drawings, and what we have here now is one that has a lot of use of stone and natural wood in it. So you can see those. The last slide in those terms of those conditions is the street elevation, and you can basically see the relationship of all of the new buildings to each other. Landscaping design, the landscaping is focused on the front of all of the buildings and in the common areas along the common strata part. And the landscaping is all native plants, shrubs and trees, so it should be fairly drought tolerant. And I think that's a good choice. These are the 3D modeling drawings that we received, and some samples of those. This is looking at building number 6, looking back towards building number 5. Here's building number 7, looking towards Marine Way and the buildings. Looking back towards building number 7. This is an illustration of a different color variation on the same plan. Another variation of the coloring scheme. And this drawing illustrates the relationship of the existing buildings to the new buildings there. In terms of recommendations, staff are recommending, I won't read them out, but there are the recommendations there in terms of height. Subject to notification to the neighboring property owners, and we plan to do that notification in time for the following council meeting, not March 7th, but it will be March 14th. Is that correct? Sorry, 21st. 21st. I apologize. And we're also making the covenant that provided no buildings higher than 2 stories above that level of that paved strata road adjacent to them. In terms of the issuance of the variance, we're also subject to the issuance of the variance as well, and that the property then be developed in accordance. So this part, section number 3 of your recommendations, is talking about the development permit itself. I didn't mention the geotechnical Pacific Consultants reports, but they're listed here in the recommendations. The geotechnical engineer states that the project and the development are feasible and assessed as such, as provided that the recommendations are followed. There are no red flags. There's a landslide assessment and there's no red flags. That's all on it. Architectural drawings have been prepared and basically run through those, and I'll just move fairly quickly here, try not to list them. And we did talk about the exterior materials. They consist of cement board plank siding, wood soffits, wood posts and beam balcony accents, natural wood and natural stone accents, and we're requesting that it say no vinyl or metal siding because that was one of the alternatives, and I would prefer that it not have vinyl siding or metal siding. That all on-site exterior lighting be downcast and energy efficient. That's coming out of their sustainability report. That all the units be constructed on one level and be accessible via level walkway and elevator, and that the units be constructed to an adaptable standard. And that all flat and moderately sloped roofs be planted green where decking is not provided. Now these last few are coming from the developer, has stated these things, so we're making those as part of the development permit since he has stated them. That the development include the items listed but not shown if there's anything else in the sustainability report that can be stated in words. That would be that. And that the number 9 is that the minimum 7-meter wide common strata road, 6 meters of pavement with 5-meter shoulders be provided to access all buildings. Currently the pavement goes up all the way to the retaining wall. I misjudged that. I think we may have to do 1 meter kind of gravel to the one side. The fire department is fine with that as long as there's a clear path of 7 meters for them to get through. The landscaping bonding equivalent to what has been estimated as the cost from the architect in the amount of $86,378.60 to be secured for a period of up to 2 years after complete installation. That a statutory right-of-way be registered and developed for paved pedestrian public access from Marine Way to the existing waterfront dedicated parks adjacent to the property. That, as I explained in the report, was never done at that time when they did put a statutory right-of-way that linked the 2 parks but did not come back towards Marine Way. And that prior to the issuance of the development permit, a tree protection plan be submitted, and that a tree protection covenant be registered on all lands within 15 meters measured horizontally of the current natural boundary of the ocean located at Porpoise Bay, Seashell Inlet. The tree protection plan requirement comes out of the environmental management bylaw, which talks about when that kicks in, and it's when you're going to cut down trees. It's not necessary to have it as part of this in terms of seeing it beforehand, because those are handled through the management of through the bylaw, it's handled by staff. Tree protection plans, tree permits are handled at the staff level. So that's my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is a rather complex item. We have a variance permit for height and then also a development permit based on that height for form and character. So open this up to committee for the first questions. Okay, I'll start then. So I had a question related to access to the parking. Do we have a way to bring that up to show that?
Yeah.
Just a little clear. And specifically access to the underground parking.
Okay, I could actually do it from the landscaping one. I'll just go back to that one. Oh.
Well, this will work for my
Yeah.
question. So up on the left there, the open area, that's where the entrance is. So all traffic is going to have to come in and snake around there and enter. Is that for all buildings?
So this will be the existing entrance here. And then it's paved now. It comes back out here. Then there's an underground parking that will come in here and link all of these buildings here.
Are you sure?
Would you like to speak to that? If I, yeah.
You get in from the Greenway. We also get in from where the circular part is, right there. There's another access to the park there.
Okay.
Does that connect all 4 buildings there, or just
We're going to have to save those for after if you have further questions.
So if I can make that statement, the drawings are indicating that all of these 4 drawings are connected by an underground parking garage through here to this point, so that the amount of traffic, I believe, that will be flowing onto the existing Strata Road will be more limited to these new 2 buildings.
Okay, and I'm seeing some arrows there indicating flow of traffic. So are parts of that a one-way street?
No, these arrows are indicating entrances. There's an entrance here to a parking area in here. And then there's parking in here, and then this entrance is coming this way underneath this building.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear to committee. If you have something to add, yes, please.
Just let you know that the rest of those properties over there, the strata properties for this property, they're unrelated to the existing 3 phases. The existing 3 phases don't have any access rights to those roads. Those are private properties.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And just to be clear, the existing properties that we're speaking about are up on the left in that open area?
Right here.
Just point to that.
The three buildings are here, and there's the 4th building in this location here.
Okay, I just wanted committee to be clear about that because we received a delegation raising concerns from that area. So I'll look to committee then if committee has questions they'd like to raise about this. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. So some of the concerns were road widths, and you've addressed that. You've indicated that what's being provided or what you've initially put forward may need to be re-looked at. Is that correct?
I've said it would be 6 meters with 0.5 meters either side. I think that we can just say 7 meters would be what I would recommend to council, and then we work that out with 6 meters of pavement.
Okay. And then with the variances that are being requested, the buildings that are being proposed would be no higher than the current existing buildings. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Other than that,
Could she just show you one existing building with the height of the other building?
We're going to have further questions as this process continues on. So please, if you could please hold your questions to the end. Thank you.
What I saw in the drawings, and I may be mistaken in this, was that it was buildings 8, 9, and 10, I believe, that would look like they would be a little higher than the current existing buildings. The other proposed buildings would be either the same height or lower. So there's 8, and it looks like 8 would be higher.
There's
8, 9,
a
and 10.
stairwell upper section that could be possibly changed out, but that's.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing from the community in the presentations and in the material that's been presented to us is that they would prefer that those 3 buildings not be higher than the current existing buildings. That's one of the concerns I'm hearing in the community. I had a question around process. I read through the geotechnical report, and it indicates in there that at many places during the building, the geotechnical engineer needs to be on site or have checked that. I'm wondering about our process. How do we ensure that that happens? And like do reports come to us indicating that that's happened? How do we know that, given that we're going to be doing some blasting, we're going to be going into bedrock, it's critical in this building that actually happen. How do we ensure that that is actually happening?
So we get the reports as they come in from the consultants. Both the architect and the engineer will be required to submit their reports when they've done their inspections.
Okay, but in our process, given that they're saying at various stages these need to happen, how do we ensure that they have happened rather than just waiting for reports to come in? Do we diarize them that things have to happen? You know what I'm saying? Because we're actually responsible to ensure that they're done. I'm just wondering what our process.
With respect to geotech, because we don't have the technical ability to actually be on site and evaluate it, we really do have to go by the reports from the geotech and the requirement of the applicant to follow it. So there's certain limitations on that from our perspective in terms of our ability to enforce. There are times when we do send our bylaw out, or building inspectors, but it's usually at building inspection that things are picked up, but sometimes that is a limitation, and that's why they have very high liability insurance.
If I could just jump in with a further clarification. So this would be governed then by letters of assurance from the engineers? Yeah, so that's pretty standard.
And if I could just comment on that, there will be no building occupancy unless those letters of assurance have been finalized and issued as well. So none of the consultants will sign off, most likely, without having been there to see and do those inspections.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions from committee? Because we have we're being asked for 2 quite distinct things. We're asking for a height variance and then also for a development permit depending on that variance. Perhaps we should work through item 2 if I have a mover, and then move to item 3 if there are no issues raised. If there are no further general comments.
I'll move recommendation 2A.
Okay, 2A is moved. Do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Shanks. Okay, any discussion of that before we vote?
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You were ahead, Councillor Shanks. I apologize. Feel free.
Yeah, I would just like to echo Councillor Seeger's concerns about the height of those particular buildings, 8, 9, and 10, as something that could potentially be addressed with a developer. Okay.
Councillor Seegers.
Oh, I am second. Okay, thank you. Given that we're looking to pass all of this at once, I can't support this as it's presented. If we did 2A, 1, 2, and 3, I could support that and the variances, but I will not support the variances on those others until we've gone back to the developer and looked at those. So with indulgence, I'd like to split that. Thanks.
So that was to split the motion. That was an an amendment, I would say, than on the current motion. Do we have some clarity, and just want to be sure that those are the buildings, in fact? And there, I just want to say that there was a little bit of confusion the way that those buildings were presented. It would be easier if we had one entire topo to look at rather than a various number of sections, because it didn't allow us to follow that very easily. So are we clear on the buildings that you like to separate out? I'm not comfortable with it, but I'd like to see on the map which particular buildings it is, so we can be clear. I believe it's the buildings that are directly in front of the existing strata that you wanted to pull out of the pack.
Can we show 7 in terms of its comparison?
7, 6, 5.
Yeah.
And then you want to see the section of those?
Yeah, of 7.
There's 5, 5,
Yeah.
6,
Right.
6 is ugly.
Okay, so that one then raises the issue of the height.
Yeah.
So I think that's, if I hear the question correctly, it's building 7 through 10 that want to be pulled off the list, and building 5 and 6 to be decided in isolation. So the amendment then was to deal with 2A, 1 and 2. I have a mover. And second, so that's the amendment to the original motion. All those in favor to the amendment? Okay, so that's carried. And then we'll deal with the motion itself, that development variance permit be approved for 2A, 1 and 2. Moved and seconded. Some discussion on that from anyone who's interested. I wanted to jump in here with a comment. In relation to the other buildings, these buildings are less of an issue in terms of impacts to views of the neighboring properties. However, I want to note that a 5.95 meter increase of a variance and a 4.8 as well, that represents a 25% total height variance, presents me with some trouble as well. It has a potential to impact the neighboring properties and in terms of their view corridors, and so I have issues with it, but I'm interested to hear what committee thinks about these two buildings. Councillor Lutz.
Looking at the angles of those two buildings, I don't think they're going to be as offensive to the existing buildings, and I can support that increase for those. I really like the density it brings. I think it's important that we use as little land space as possible for our residents, and for me, this is a good increase.
Further questions from committee? So I have one of staff at this point. The zoning of this property is a R4, and so 10.5 meters is the max. Is there another zone that might be able to deal with the heights in a cleaner way? Ms. Letman.
No, throughout the district, our maximum, our typical height of all of our zones, unless it's a CD zone, is 10.5 meters.
So they would need to be a multifamily CD.
It would have to be a CD zone too.
Okay. Further questions from committee on this? All right, so I'll call the question. All those in favor, 2A, 1 and 2. And that's carried. So do I have a mover then for 2A, 3, 4, 5, and 6? Okay. Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. I'm not happy with moving them the way they are. I would like these to go back to staff to talk to the developer to look at reducing the height. I'm not willing to support the variance in increasing the height on these at this time.
Okay, do we have a mover or a seconder for either of those moving upward? Okay, seeing none. Do we have a mover for the rest of 2? B and C. Okay. Moved by Councillor Seegers. Seconded by Councillor Lutz. Any discussion at this point about the issue of no building is higher than 2 stories above the level of the paved road and subject to notification? So 2 simple motions. All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving. Sorry, I'll recognize you, Mike. Councillor Shanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we need any recommendation at all with respect to 2A, 3, 4, 5, and 6? Or staff just going to look after
Just to
that?
recoup where we had one councillor express some difficulties with the heights, and none of these moved forward. So I guess we could refer those back to staff in a motion, and they could then take those from there.
Like to make that motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you for that. Moving on, do I have a mover for recommendation number 3, subject to the issuance of the development variance permit that the property be developed? 3A1, moved by Councillor Seegers. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lutz. Any discussion? So everybody's aware, this is about the geotech.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could make a recommendation. I think we'll need to come back to you because this is talking about the development permit. And if you only pass the one motion without the rest, it needs to be all in one development permit. So I would like to suggest that this part get tabled, that we work with the developer and bring this back to either committee or council.
Yeah, that's
whatever is
agreeable.
your pleasure.
That's agreeable to the chair. If any councillor is willing to make that motion. So that is a motion then to table recommendations 3 and 4 and bring back to committee at a later date, unspecified. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? And that's been tabled. Okay, so that deals with that for today. Moving on to business item 6.6, Luch and McCarter rezoning, report by the community planner. Or is this the municipal planner? Okay, Ms. Stepjevic, if I could ask you to turn on your mic. And we will receive the report. So moved and seconded for receipt. All those in favor? Thank you. Ms. Stepjevic.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application is for a rezoning. The location of the property is in the East Porpoise Bay neighborhood. You can see the star there. That's just an aerial image a little closer. Bayview Campground is just to the north, and the Lehigh properties on the west east side. There's a couple of photos from Seashell Inlet Road and just a little into the property of some of the trees on the site. So the official community plan, future land use designations for this lot is business industry, and the surrounding just immediate lots are also that purple color there, business industry. To the north is low density residential. To the east is agriculture. There's a working waterfront industrial lands on the west, and the multifamily mixed residential and tourist commercial just at the southwest end of this site. So the existing zoning right now is rural, and the purple on this map shows the industrial 6, which this application is proposing to move towards. The proposal is to rezone the property from RR2 rural 2 zone to I6 industrial 6 zone to allow for industrial uses. And those are, there's also separate applications for a development permit to guide the proposed subdivision development on the steeper portions of the property closer to the Seashell Inlet Road side. And there's also an application for a subdivision going from 4 hectares into 10 lots with 9 of approximately 2,000 square meters and 1 of 16,000 square meters. Those will be dealt with further in the process, further on in the process. So this is kind of small print, but I was attempting to show the permitted uses in the I6 zone. You'll see we're recommending, based on feedback from the Community Association and the Advisory Planning Commission, to modify the I6 permitted uses by taking out the ones in red. So that would be crematorium, the boarding of animals, aquaculture processing of forest and possibly wood products, medical marijuana production, medical marijuana research and development, and leave the remaining uses. So staff is basically recommending that the zoning amendment be forwarded to council for consideration of first reading, referral to the public for public hearing, and that final adoption be conditional on the items listed, which are removal or demolition of the existing single-family home because it's not compatible with industrial zoning. There are other options, and we can work with the applicant to figure out whether they would get a building permit that would convert it to an industrial building or something like that. It would be conditional on an issued tree permit with tree protection plan to deal with some of the points that came up about creating more of a buffer to transition between the different uses in the area. So there was a desire to see existing trees preserved along some of the roads, the public roads. A preliminary subdivision layout approval. That we enter into a signed servicing agreement for some extended infrastructure works on the west side of Seashell Inlet Road. Our engineering department has requested that that we look at extending some of the pavement on the opposite side of Seashell Inlet, and switching the sidewalk and the street lights also to the other side where it makes more sense to do so, so that it's contiguous with existing streetlights, and the applicant has shown agreement on that. So, and the excluding the uses, as I mentioned, provision of an archaeological preliminary field reconnaissance. That was a request of the Seashell First Nation, because there was there's some sites recorded in the nearby area. The provision of an environmental assessment and field investigation to verify presence of heron nesting and any other important habitats, and the registration of a covenant to maintain a 5-meter vegetative buffer between the subject property and the adjoining ALR boundary to the south, because there's a small property there that's still in the ALR, so that would be a requirement of the Agricultural Land Commission. Oh, and that's the end, sorry.
Thank you very much for your report. Yeah, I'll look to committee to see if they have any questions regarding the report. Seeing none. Oh. Councillor Seekers.
Oh, sorry, I was just writing some questions down here. A couple of things. When I went through this.
Please take any time you need.
That's okay.
That's what committee is for.
I noticed the medical marijuana production, medical marijuana research and development, and yet in the I-6 zone, it says it can't be on a property that is less than 4,000 square meters. So there's only proposed at this point, only one lot in here where it could be put on that property.
That's right.
So I'm wondering what the rationale was that came forward. It came from APC and it was, came forward through staff and the community not to have that. So I'm just wondering what the rationale was. Why did they request that?
Yeah, it was a concern that they didn't want to see that permitted use through the whole property, but even on the 16,000 square meter lot.
And just if I can jump in there, these have been some standard requests coming out of that community association for some time. In previous rezonings, it's been something that we're familiar with.
Okay.
If I can also say that the applicant seemed amenable to that, to excluding that use, but it's your choice.
Okay. We'll leave that for now. The sidewalk on the other side, there is no sidewalk currently on the side where the business properties are now, right? In the I-6 zone?
No, there's no sidewalk there currently.
So the other side that we would be putting the sidewalk on, what will be developed over there? Would that not be something that we would ask the developer on that side to actually provide? I mean, this is a way to get it sooner, I get that.
This is an issue that will be dealt with as part of the subdivision process. And it was the engineering planning for the sidewalk just didn't link up. There is no sidewalk to link it would just be a piece on its own if it were put in front of their property. So we're getting them, they're required to do a sidewalk. So the engineering department requested that it be done on the other side as a switch.
But at this point, we're not even looking at that, correct? It's not one of the recommendations. It's not one of the recommendations in here.
No, it would just be that.
This is for further information down the road.
Prior to final adoption, yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Shanks for a question.
I just had some concerns about item 2A, demolition of the existing single-family home. Is there any scenario where it could be utilized in the future in terms of industrial 6?
It could be if the use were switched to industrial, but as a single-family dwelling, no, it would not be consistent with the I-6 permitted uses. There is a permitted use for caretaker suites on buildings in the I-6 zone. So when new buildings are constructed, or that one could be converted into an industrial building and have a caretaker suite, that would work. But it's up to the applicant if they want to, yeah.
Discussion could take place.
That's right. Yeah.
Further questions from committee? Oh, seeing none, I'll jump in. For those of you who've read this item, you'll see the issue of the herring rookery raised. That's the Shishel Nation and a lot of the good work that they do in protecting the natural environment around Sechelt. So